from the state of California.
Maybe Florida someday, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for facilitating this hearing today over the administration's management of $190 billion in bailout money. I think it's reasonable to say that most Americans, even Bill Gates, cannot break $190 billion down into a meaningful increment. So, hopefully accurately, I divided the 300 million or so Americans into that and found it's about $633 for every man, woman, and child in this country, plus or minus the latest census. Mr. Chairman, I voted against these bailouts. However, I'm in the minority, so I have to accept the policies given to me until the American people get their chance to vote on a different policy. And I have an opportunity as the ranking member to demand transparency and accountability on behalf of the American people who have a right to know how their money is being spent. And, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for being an equal partner in ensuring that we have that opportunity on a bipartisan basis in this important investigation. Ensuring transparency and accountability for the more than $190 billion of taxpayers' money injected into AIG is a key component of this committee's responsibilities. Just last week, we learned AIG paid $454 million in bonuses to its employees in 2008. Well, in March, we were told it was only $120 million. Well, I understand that there is confusion, and that may be that, in fact, the blame is based on different questions asked to different people in the process of getting the information. This confusion illustrates as much the serious problem in government trying to manage a company this large and this complex. The continued lack of transparency in this administration's bailouts adventures, and I must admit, much like the previous administration, caused me to say, how dare we find out drip by drip by drip that our government has no ability to say how much money has been spent or on what? How much longer can the American people tolerate the lack of transparency? I am pleased that Mr. Liddy is here today, and I want to acknowledge that he did not create the problems at AIG, but instead has taken on the very difficult challenge of unwinding an incredibly complex company while facing tremendous scrutiny from the public and from those of us here in Congress. I want to personally say to Mr. Liddy, today we will make every effort to make this about how we can work together better, how we can achieve the transparency the American people are entitled to, and how we can do no harm to your efforts to maximize the return to all the stockholders of AIG, and particularly we are going to be asking about the 80% that the American people own. Mr. Chairman, President Obama has promised the American people unprecedented level of transparency and accountability, and I see our role on the committee as one of holding the President to that promise, and that includes understanding the role of the three powerful individuals who now head the AIG Trust, as designed by Treasury Secretary Geithner when he ran the New York Fed. I believe that this trust is inherently unconstitutional, unaccountable entity that manages the taxpayers' investments in AIG, not for the taxpayers, but in the name of the interest of the Federal Government, specifically the U.S. Treasury. It is important to remember, Mr. Chairman, that those are two things are not one and the same. The U.S. Treasury is, in fact, not the same as the American people who have invested $633 for every man, woman, and child into this company. I want to acknowledge also that for the second panel, the trustees, they did not create this problem, and they will not be held accountable for what was created. However, since they now control 80% of the stock of AIG on behalf of, I believe, should be the American people and not just the best interest of the Treasury, we must question why AIG trustees are immune from legal liability so long as they act in the best interest of the Treasury and are indemnified against any loss, cost, or expense of any kind or character whatsoever. Who can doubt, Mr. Chairman, in light of recent public bullying of Chrysler bondholders who were derided as speculators by President Obama, that these clauses insulate the trustees from the normal accountability and transparency we demand of all our representatives? The New York Times recently reported that this unprecedented trust structure provides cover for officials who, despite the government's large stake in various banks, want to preserve the notion that neither the Treasury nor the Fed owns AIG or controls any banks. Mr. Chairman, I would submit that this is inappropriate for regulators and bureaucrats to use this legal sleight of hand to obscure the influence in running the U.S. financial sector. The American people have a right to know what is being done with their money and how these companies are being run. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to our witnesses. I appreciate your indulgence and would ask that additional material be placed in the record so as to preserve time and yield back.
Without objection.